Hey, you might be wondering why I'm dressed so formally right now. Well, it's because I just got done playing this thing that I'm pretty big on called video games. Being that I'm so big on these video games, I wrote a paper this past quarter in my English 102 class about them. And what do you know? Instead of presenting in person in my class, I actually made a video. And guess what? You are all going to have the privilege to see it as well. So, before I disappear for the next 5 hours watching video games being played professionally, I decided to post this little video thing. Tell me what an absolutely shitty job I did on my presentation video, because in addition to this sort of funny, quirky, animation, stupid video game stuff I post normally, I think I'm gonna add more of this analytical, informative stuff where I talk about video games and pretend to be smart video game stuff, video games, to my channel, video games. So enjoy, and when you're done, go watch some StarCraft 2, Halo, and Assorted Fighters over at MajorLeagueGaming.com, because that is exactly where I will be. I will see you guys all later. Enjoy the stupid me talking about thinking that I know what video games are. I don't. What is a video game? Greetings, Joshua Patrick's English 102 class. I am this, and I normally go by this, and I have opted to save you all a socially awkward presentation in person and make a video instead. So, let's jump right in. I wrote my paper on video games being accepted as a form of art because who doesn't like video games? Starting my paper, my guiding question was something like this. What artistic qualities are lacking in video games that are holding them back from being considered art? After a little research and a first workshop, my question turned into more of, why is there so much resistance against video games being accepted as art? And my final thesis for my paper turned out something like this. So there are video games that possess artistic, aesthetic qualities, or that can be cited as art. There's so much resistance against video games being accepted as art because the majority are created for the sole purpose of entertainment and essentially viewed as toys. Video games will only be accepted as art once the industry stands up for the expressive power of video games against the masses. So in my paper, I first opened by trying to pin down this very broad subject or definition of art. And what I found is that a lot of people consider a key fundamental of art to be expression. So with art, the way you express something and what you express are limitless. You can express things like emotions, feelings, theories, and themes or messages. This concept of expression is what I focused on in my paper. Jumping into the controversy, the opinions of those in opposition of video games as art are sort of encompassed by three main reasons. Those reasons being, video games are made for the sole purpose of entertainment and a lot of them do not express anything or utilize the capacity they have to express. Some believe that since video games involve this aspect of player choice and interactivity, that they lack the authorial control needed to express things. And lastly, many believe that the unique elements of gameplay and interactivity do not add anything to expression in art. Since video games don't bring anything unique to art, they are not considered art. With my paper, I sort of broke it into two sections. First, I addressed this stigma that video games lack a capacity to express things, and I sort of prove and illustrate that video games do have this capacity to express. For the second section of my paper, I focus on the fact that the majority of video games are made for entertainment only, and what this means for video games being accepted as art. Starting with the first section of my paper, I tried to show that video games have this unique capacity to express through illustrating two examples, one of a more unorthodox means of expression, and one of a more traditional means of expression through narrative. So the first example that I showed, I wanted to illustrate that games are capable of expressing things through process and have meaning emanate from a model. Through experiencing how a system works, you can derive meaning or a message from the interaction of these processes. This guy, Rod Humble, made this game by himself called The Marriage, and it expresses how he believes a marriage feels. With a second example, I illustrated that in video games there's an aspect that an element of reality is actually happening to you. The element of interactivity adds a nuance that engages the viewer, forcing the player to not just empathize with the situation of a character, but deliberate with the questions characters are posed with on a more personal level and test them against their own morals and beliefs in a much more direct nature, because they are actually having to answer the questions. In the game Bastion, a narrative game, players are faced with different questions revolving around this theme of overcoming regret. Experiencing the journey that the main character had to go through on a first-hand account is key in understanding the consequences of each decision. After displaying and showing that not only do video games have this capacity to express, that there are games out there that have explored these deeper avenues of the human condition and life, I got into the topic of games being made, the majority of them being made for entertainment purposes only. Video games being called games has sort of created this generalization that all video games are toys. toys. When controversy arises about a game, because of this stigma that video games are toys, people don't look at games for their content, they judge them based on the fact that they are toys. People don't see a team of artists who create these video games, they see a team of toy makers that have gone too far. So I illustrated this notion through an example of a game that was being developed called 6 Days in Fallujah. A battalion returning from Iraq who had recently participated in this battle called the Battle of Fallujah came to Atomic Games, this game developer, and said, hey, we really want to put into a game the experiences that we had in the Battle of Fallujah. When the announcement of the game hit the news, the developers were hit with a hailstorm of criticism. A lot of people in many groups saying that making a game on the Battle of Fallujah would disrespect those that were killed there. Ultimately, funding and support for the game was pulled because the publisher caved from the public pressure. On a final note, video games have proven that they have this capacity to express, and there are games that go out of their way to solely express something. But it's because of this misconception that video games are toys, and only toys, that they are having such a hard time being accepted as art. Ultimately, it is up to the gaming industry to stand up for games that dare to boldly go and sort of tackle these controversial issues. Not only that, but it is up to developers and the entire industry as well to utilize the capacity that games have to express things and not just make games as entertainment. So these two concepts in conjunction with one another, making games that express things and utilize the capacity that games have to express, and standing up for the games that do step into these more controversial areas, will begin to push video games towards a direction of being considered as a form of art. Just as film opened different avenues of thought and self-reflection that were unexplored, games have that same potential to open a new eye into humanity. Man, talking about video games intellectually gets me so excited. Okay, moving on to analyzing my work in the class and critiquing the class. The key things that I've taken away from this class is the ability to eliminate extraneous information and write concise and direct topic sentences that relate idea to idea throughout my paper. Not to mention becoming more and more proficient with using research databases, the library, interlibrary loan, and the Big Red books. That was extremely helpful to me as a writer and researcher. I've also learned that as a student, it is ever so important for me to make sure I am personally invested in whatever I'm doing in order for me to stay interested and to succeed. Moving on to critiquing the class. I appreciated the progressive nature of the class, and I felt like everything we did in class, from the assignments to the homework and writing packet, I thought that they all in some way or another directly went into helping me on my paper. And lastly, I also appreciated Mr. Patrick's thoughtful and detailed feedback on all of our major assignments and homework assignments, because I really felt like that helped me understand sort of the holes in my writing as well. Kind of goes without saying, but I really appreciated Mr. Patrick's visual representation and diagram showing us where the scope of our thesis and paper was amongst the controversy that we're writing about. It's right there. I know that now. And I regret putting that in this video immediately. But that does it for my sort of thing in English 102. Thanks for watching my presentation. I had fun this quarter and learned a lot. Thanks for watching my presentation. Thanks.